festive season. And I know that there's a couple of people here that are Second Nature members. Hopefully, some of my group members. Hello, everyone, and maybe past Second Nature members, and maybe some people that are not members. But I want to welcome everybody and just share a little bit more about who we are in Second Nature. So, Second Nature is a program that helps people change their behaviors through an app so that they reach their health goals. So there's three elements of the program that lead to behavior change, and that's education, support, and the tools that we offer. Our education materials are all evidence-based and are there to help you make informed choices. But we know that information is just one piece of the puzzle and that information alone isn't enough to help us change. And this is why when you sign up to Second Nature, you get assigned a nutritionist like myself or Jem or Ren. And we guide you through the process and support you to set up a personalized plan. And then in the app, you find a whole bunch of tools to support you on your journey, like food diaries, meal planners, trackers. And the best bit is that we have 400 nutritionist approved recipes. So super yummy, super easy to get started. And that's who we are at Second Nature. So we're here to change minds about losing weight, and we do that through changing behaviors. But enough about Second Nature, more about you. So thank you again for taking the time to join. Whether you were watching live or the recording, I think coming to this webinar shows your commitment to do something different. And, you know, it's the festive season. So I thought, why not set the tone for a cozy holiday celebration? Like any great Christmas get together, we know that a festive jumper is a must. So while we settle in, I would love to hear from you. So just using one word, can you please in the chat share what type of Christmas jumper would you wear? So I decided to wear just one with color. So because I couldn't find mine, it was last minute. But I would love to hear in the chat what kind of Christmas jumpers would people wear in. And I see some of them coming through already.
Oh, we've got loads. So we've got penguin, reindeer, colourful, baggy, Rudolph, sparkle, snowflakes,
Wow.
another reindeer with bells,
Santa's.
lights up, sausage dog,
Sausage dog. Oh, I love that.
a tree with baubles, Santa, snowman. Oh, we've got fantastic ones coming through.
Grinch,
Grinch.
Gingerbread.
gingerbread.
Oh, hand knitted. I love that. That is
Love
so.
it.
Oh, thank you so much. So I really
Stockings, of course.
feel now that we're in the holiday spirit. Like I could really, really feel it. I think all that's missing is the cup of tea, which I don't have. I just have a glass of water here. But yeah, I thought that's really nice way to get started and to settle in before we talk about what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to first start off navigating and exploring why making healthy choices can feel so challenging during this time of year. I think that we can't make meaningful changes unless we know what's getting in the way. Then I'm going to dive into the three tips to help you make healthy choices. These are focused primarily around food and mindset. So we won't delve much into exercise today as we just didn't have time to fit it in. And then we're going to have a little bit of fun with a festive mastermind, and this will give you a chance to apply what we've discussed today. And then we'll wrap up with a summary of key points. So Jem, Ren, and I really want to make sure that you leave the webinar with confidence to put these ideas in practice. So we'll then open up the floor for questions. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So when we talk about why it's hard to make healthy choices during the festive season, often what I hear people saying is like, you know what, Yancy, I just don't have enough willpower to resist all the food and all of the temptations. And often we think that if we had more willpower, we could resist that. But the reality is that willpower is constantly influenced and depleted by external and internal pressures. Because of this, it's not really something that we can rely on. So some of the external and internal pressures that drain willpower are things like advertising. So during this time of year, companies spend billions of pounds creating ads to just help you crave more treats. And it's really hard to say no. Social media is really big as well. Seeing others indulge can create a fear of missing out. Supermarkets have all of these tactics to encourage impulse buying. And there's also the social pressure, right, around friends and family encouraging us to just have one more dessert or drink. And saying no in these situations is really hard. But we also have the internal pressures, right? The things that are happening inside of us. So these are emotional and psychological factors. So even though the festive season is seen as something that is filled with joy, like family dynamics and family structures can be very complicated, and these can bring about stress, nostalgia, and grief. And then there's also the previous dieting mindset that calls out that all or nothing mentality about, some foods are good and bad. And then the practical pressures, right? Busy schedules, we've got shifts, we're caring for others. And then, it just really leaves us depleted. And so this is why relying on willpower often fails. There's this constant stream of pressures that just exhausts it completely. Now, you might be thinking, the solution here is to move to a cave in the Himalayas. No, it's not, okay? What we're going to do is that we're going to learn how to navigate this because we can't change these situations, right? We've done the hard bit now where we've recognized the awareness, right? We understand that situation, and hopefully that takes away that self-blame that usually comes. And so we can now shift that narrative from, I just need more willpower, to, how can I approach this differently? And by asking yourself that question, it will allow you to put a system in place to navigate all of these internal and external pressures. And this is where the first tip comes into place. And the first tip is thinking about reframing your focus. So I know that for a lot of you on the call, weight loss is likely one of your goals, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with having weight loss as one of the goals. But here's the thing. Sometimes the struggles we face with food and weight stems from the beliefs passed down from restrictive diets, right? That solely focus on weight loss. And that's the issue, right? Solely focusing on weight loss leads us to restrict foods, right? Feeling that we have to avoid festive treats entirely, or we might obsess over calories, thinking that we need to track every bite and feeling anxious about going over the limit. Or we also have that all or nothing mentality, right? That we think good or bad, and that leads to extreme behaviors. And that also then leads to guilt, right? So what we want to shift from is get away from what do I need to do to lose weight? Because that just sounds very exhausted, and it's very difficult, and it's not sustainable. And that ties into what we said about willpower. When you're constantly battling those internal rules and external pressure, it's no wonder it feels impossible to stay on track. So if the sole focus is weight loss, it would lead us to go back to this practice. And so that's why the first tip is to reframe our focus and ask ourselves, what do I need to practice this festive season? And when we do that, we think about, maybe I need to focus on having a little bit of balance. I'm doing really well with my meal planning, but I want to make room for my holiday favorites. Or maybe this is the only bit of activity I've included, by the way. Or maybe you want to prioritize movement because it's so cold and dark and it's just really hard to be active during this time. And we're really busy, right? Or maybe we do need to meal plan, right? I know that some people are social butterflies during this time and love going out, but it makes it really difficult to meal plan. But maybe that's what you need to practice this festive season, right? Or it might be that, it's an opportunity to really ask yourself, do I really want this? Or how do I feel? What do I need? Instead of letting somebody else dictate what it is that you need. And in some instances, it might be that we need to practice setting boundaries, right? Maybe we need to practice saying no to foods or events or things that just don't serve us. So I would say to take a moment and identify one area that you would like to focus on this festive season. You might want to write it down and ask yourself, what does this look like in practice for me? And then ask yourself, what small step can I take this week to start focusing on it? And for anybody that's a second nature member, I would really encourage you to share your focus point with your coach so that you can come up with a plan of action, especially if this is the first time going through the festive season while you're on the program. Or you might want to keep it as a personal reminder and revisit it throughout the season. But remember, by reframing your focus, you're creating a sustainable approach that reduces the stress, because we know that December is going to come next year and the following year, right? And we can't keep doing the same thing expecting different results. We have to take a different approach. And when we ask ourselves, what do I need to practice? Then that's when we can do something different. And so now that we've identified a focus, it's time to think about how we can bring that focus to life, like in a practical way, right? Like now we've got, okay, we know where we're headed, and we know that it isn't about willpower, right? We know that there are these internal and external pressures that influence our choices. So we might not be able to change them, but we need to put a system in place to navigate that will allow us to tackle just anything that comes our way, right? And the system is planning, right? And there are three elements of planning that will help you focus on what you need without having to rely on willpower. Now, I know that this is going to be very familiar to everybody that is on Second Nature, and there's nothing wrong with repeating things. And the first element of planning is to use a balanced plate model, right? This model is probably like one of the most simple ways that you can create meals that are balanced, ensuring that you have key components like protein, complex carbs, vegetables, and healthy fats. So these elements are going to help you keep fuller for longer and meet your nutritional needs. So you're not going to leave yourself hungry, and you're going to keep stable blood sugar levels, which means that you're less likely to overeat when you experience those internal and external pressures. So I want you to think about this balanced plate model as a map that helps you make healthy choices no matter where you are. Whether you're in Marks and Spencer's, whether you're at the shop, whether you're at a friend's, whether you're at the work canteen, anywhere, try to use that balanced plate model to guide your choices. It's flexible and it can be applied to all types of meal. But I also invite you to think about these following things. Make your meals delicious, enjoyable, and satisfying. Healthy doesn't have to be about deprivation, right? If anybody likes to eat chicken and broccoli, there's nothing wrong, but you don't have to eat that to lose weight, right? Take a look at the Second Nature recipes for more ideas. There's loads. My favorite, minestrone soup and broccoli stir fry. The other thing is also make your foods culturally relevant, right? Food isn't just about nutrition, it's deeply tied to identity, tradition, and personal history. When we disregard the foods that are culturally meaningful to us, we risk feeling disconnected from our past and the communities we belong to. And that's what leads to overeating. So make sure that you eat the things that connect you to your culture. I do this constantly. As you can tell, I'm not from here. So I eat the foods from where I'm from because it keeps me connected to my family and where I'm from. And affordable, right? Make choices that fit in with your budget. Maybe there's foods here that you don't eat. Maybe there's foods that don't fit in the budget. So really focus on that affordability without compromising on nutrition. And remember, it's not about relying on willpower, right? This is a model that gives you the strategy to navigate those pressures. So, for example, I had this webinar this afternoon, this evening. And so I focused on having the balanced plate model because I was stressed, right? But because I was full and I was not feeling hungry, I'm better able to cope with that stress because I've had the balanced meal, right? And then if I were to go out later, I'm like, okay, I've had my meal, I've had my healthy snacks, and I'm able to make an informed choice later on. So it's really important to use that balanced plate model as a guide. Now, the second point about planning is to factor in foods that you enjoy while also considering your routine. So we know that during the festive season, your routine is going to change. Like we know that it's not going to be the same as it was in October and November, right? There's a lot more social events, right? And when it comes to meal planning, like everybody has different strategies, right? Some people like to plan 1 to 2 days in advance, others plan 3 to 4, and other like to plan the full days, the full 7 days. Another option, which I love, is planning 7 meals and just choosing what you fancy on the day, depending on what you're feeling. But what I want to demonstrate with you with this meal plan is that you've got the 7 days here and you've got an idea of what you're going to have for your meals. But what I really want you to focus here is about factoring in those social situations so that you're enjoying the foods at those events, but also you're enjoying those festive foods because you want them, right? Mince pies. I'm sure that there's a lot of people here that love mince pies. Personally, I love them as well. Factor them in, right? If you like a hot chocolate, factor it in. If you're going to your work drinks, factor that in. And we then zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Look at that balance that there is, right? There's a really, really great balance. And I remember last year when I was doing this webinar, somebody asked me, okay, that's great, but how do I stop eating those foods? And I was like, that's a really great question and really, really powerful. And you know what? That comes up a lot. Often we think that what we need to resolve is to stop eating that food, right? But in reality, this goes back to that all or nothing mindset that is common in those restrictive diets. It's this mindset around that food is good or bad. Who said that mince pies are bad? Like they're great. They're a festive food. We can include them, enjoying them, and have balance, right? It's when we start labeling as good and bad that we create this kind of like forbidden fruit effect, and that something is off limits, it becomes more desirable, right? So we're skipping, we want a mince pie, we skip it, but then we go to the supermarket and we're surrounded by it. What happens? We overeat, right? So it's being about finding that balance and factor it in where you can, right? And this allows you to adopt a more flexible mindset and enjoyment, right? And I think that that's really important because diets do not let us enjoy. It's like suffering. This is enjoyment while also including things that are going to meet your nutrition requirements. So I want you to think instead of that it's either or. So it's not about it's either the apple or the mince pie. It's the mince pie and it's also the healthy breakfast and it's also this. So I hope that that's kind of like a little thing that you can remember for when you are factoring in those foods. And then the third option for this meal planning, is making simple swaps. Now, this might seem at odds with what I've just mentioned earlier. So it's not about restricting foods. Instead, it's allowing ourselves to enjoy a variety of foods, right? And recognizing that during the holiday season, there's like an overwhelming abundance of food, right? There's just foods that are very high in sugar, absolutely everywhere. So sometimes we will crave those healthy options. And I know that what happens to a lot of people that are on second nature that start making these changes, they see that their taste buds start to change, right? And what they thought was going to be enjoyable isn't as enjoyable as before. So I think that these are swaps that we can include when we're making foods at home that will then allow you to keep that balance when you're leaving the house and having these types of foods when you're out and about. So one of the things that you can swap are, for example, instead of crisp, maybe at home you're like, I want to have some vegetable sticks with some dips, right? This can either be homemade or shop bought, some hummus, tzatziki, baba ganoush, or maybe, potatoes, they're delicious, but maybe I want to include some variety. I want to have some turnips, some parsnips, some swede, which I love, by the way, uh, or with chocolate, right? Celebrations, they're everywhere, right? But they're very easy to just eat on autopilot. Maybe we want to try and have something a little bit more nutritious so we can make the chocolate bark. Instead of a Yule log, we might try to make the chocolate tarts. And instead of alcohol, we might try some cocktails. I think that Ren is going to be sharing at some point some of these recipes, or maybe at the end we'll share some of these recipes in the chat. But you can find all of these recipes in the Second Nature app. So these are the practical tips around planning, and then which takes us to, oops, oh sorry, I went outside. That wasn't meant to happen. Whoopsies. And then the final tip, mindset, right? No matter how much we plan, even though I love planning and I'm telling you to plan, there's going to be an unexpected situation that arises, right? It's going to happen. So we need to think about how are we going to navigate that, right? And so the next tip is really about focusing on mindset, and it starts really with a simple pause, right? When we're faced with a food choice, it's pausing and asking yourself first, what am I feeling right now? Take a moment to check in with your emotions. Are you feeling stressed, tired, or relaxed? Sometimes we're making food choices based on what we're feeling. So identifying that can help you decide whether it's hunger or an emotional need. And if it's an emotional need, we might need something else apart from food to satisfy that. Then we can ask ourselves, what do I know about my goals, right? Remind yourself of the festive period goal, right? Are the choices that you're making in line with that goal? And then finally ask yourself, what choices can I make that honor both how I feel and my goals? So consider the balanced option that meets both of those needs. And sometimes it will be about having that sweet thing, but maybe sometimes it's about doing something else. But it's only when we ask ourselves what we really want, rather than letting those weight loss goals or those restrictive diets dictate what we should be eating. It's about focusing on what we need because we know our bodies best, right? And so this will help you feel more in control, less reactive, and better equipped to make healthy choices. And then remember, when you're eating these balanced meals, because you're not hungry, you're better able to deal with all of that. So these were the three tips. I'm going to provide a summary at the end so that you have a little bit of an action plan. Now we're going to move into the fun part, right? We're going to apply everything that we've learned so far. And so there's just three questions, and I want to just clarify something. Sorry, I want to clarify something about the scenarios that we've chosen for the questions. These are things that people have come to me and like the coaches throughout the years that I've worked with Second Nature. So I've been with Second Nature for 6 years, and I've been a nutritionist for 10 years. So these are things that come up all the time, right? Um, so we'll offer some suggestions on how to respond to the situation, but I want you to remember that these are just suggestions, right? It's important to know that if you've handled things differently in the way that we're going to suggest it, there's absolutely no judgment, right? This isn't about saying that you've done things wrong at all. In fact, it's completely the opposite. These scenarios are really about raising awareness about our behaviors that sometimes we're just not aware are happening, right? And we're confused, like, why are things working for me? It's only when we're aware of it that we can start to make those changes, right? So this is only, please take it as a way to learn about your behaviors. It's really about no judgment, and it's a fun thing to do, right? Who loves a little festive mastermind quiz, right? So we're gonna start off with our first question. So Jem is gonna kindly uh, bring up our poll question. So the question is, you're going to an all-day celebration with food available from noon until late. How would you approach eating throughout the day? Would you, one, skip the event? Two, use the balanced plate model to guide your choices, check with your hunger and fullness cues, and choose foods you enjoy? Or would you, three, skip breakfast to save on calories and indulge later? Or finally, eat as much as you can and then skip meals and exercise the next day to compensate?
Oh, I think we're coming in with a winner, Yancy.
Yeah. Okay.
Got
Love.
94% with number two, use the balanced plate model.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I love this. Right. I love this. I love this. Yeah. So it's using the balanced plate model, right? We're going to check in with our hunger and fullness cues to decide as well about when we're going to stop eating, choosing foods that we enjoyed, right? We talked about planning and factoring things in, right? And the reason why it wasn't the other answer is because skipping breakfast followed by overindulging, it's often a way of compensating, which feeds into the cycle of restriction, right? So that kind of like creates that all or nothing mindset. So it's really great that we're already seeing how important using that balanced plate model is. So that's great. Lovely. I wish I could award points or something, but I don't have that power yet. So the next question is, so Jem, would you be so kind to launch it? So You're at an event and a friend, we all have a friend like this, or a family member comes over and offers you another serving of your favorite dish or maybe alcohol, saying, "It's the holidays, don't be so boring." How would you respond? Would you, one, politely decline, two, take a small portion and enjoy it mindfully, or you take a drink and enjoy it, or you accept the drink even though you don't want it? How would you respond? And I know this might be a little bit of a trick question because there's two answers actually. So just putting it out there.
So it's almost an even split between politely decline and take a small portion and enjoy it mindfully. But enjoy it mindfully is coming in at 55%. So it's just over.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? So there's kind of like there was like two potential options. Politely declining is about setting boundaries, right? And that's what we said, that maybe for the festive season, we have to start thinking about what do we need to practice, right? If we're saying yes to something we really don't want, we need to consider the message that we're sending ourselves. Are we prioritizing others over our own well-being? So setting that boundary allows us to honor our needs and make choices that align with our goals. Now, the other option is to accept that portion and eat it mindfully, and this allows us to be part of the experience. And the reason why there's those two answers is because we need to gauge the situation based on context, right? When it comes to the festive season, there's a lot of cultural and social norms at play. So it's doing about what feels comfortable. Like I can't, think of all of the different types of situation, and I don't know all of the cultural norms that people are kind of like abiding to, but it's important to recognize that, right? And sometimes that's why we won't necessarily politely decline, but we'll take a small portion. And it might be taking that small portion isn't about having it then in the moment. It can also be, "Thank you so much," and I'll take it away. But just remember that there's a lot of like different variables at play here. And then it takes us to our final question. So it's politely decline. Jem, if you would be so kind um, to launch it. So it's a hectic day at the holiday work lunch. We know we know that happens, right? Those work lunches. You skipped breakfast and you were reflecting on the disagreement you had with your neighbor, right? Those neighbors that were playing music loudly in their Christmas party. You're hungry and stressed, and you now find yourself in front of a table filled with beige foods. What would you do? Would you, one, avoid the table and stick to water, hoping that you feel better soon? Two, sample a bit of everything and skip dinner? Or three, use the balanced plate model where possible, acknowledging it's been a tough day, and speak to a colleague about what's happening and plan your next meal?
We've got 96% who are coming in with use the balance plate model.
Yeah. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, exactly. So this is the most balanced approach, right? It acknowledges the reality of that tough day because they do exist. This does happen. Like we're not immune to it. Like it will happen, right? So we're going to use the balanced plate model where possible. And then speaking to a colleague will meet that emotional need instead of using food to try to deal with that stress, right? And then planning for your next meal allows you to move forward in a proactive way, keeping you aligned with your long-term goals, right? So when we try to avoid the table and stick to water, it leaves you feeling disconnected from the social environment, right? And you're not really focusing on your emotional needs either, right? And if you skip dinner, this again is promoting that all or nothing thinking and can lead to that restriction that we're trying to avoid, right? So where possible, where we do have these types of foods, it's then going back to having our balanced meals because that helps us avoid feel that hunger, keeps those stable blood sugar levels so that when we are in these situations with like the supermarkets and the promotions and the stress, we're better able to respond to that. So that was the answer. And so in summary, the three tips that are going to help you hopefully navigate the festive season was, the first one was about reframing your focus, right? So I would recommend for everybody, if possible, take a piece of paper and write down and ask yourself, what does this look like in practice for me? And number two, what small step can I take this week to start focusing on it? right? And think about, we're moving away from weight loss and more kind of like, what are the steps that I need to put in place that will allow me to navigate these internal and external pressures? And then with our plan, right? We had the balanced plate model that was going to be like our map. We had planning meals in a way that works for you, factoring events and things that you enjoy as well. And then we also had the healthy swaps as well, right? That you can check out in the Second Nature recipes. And finally, there was that piece about mindset. So learning how to make those healthy choices when those unexpected situations arise, right? Check in how you're feeling. What do you know about your goals, and how can you make a choice that aligns with how you feel? For anybody that's been on the Second Nature program, you might have heard of a strategy called the HALT strategy. So if you can't remember what to use the HALT strategy, or it's basically an acronym that says HALT, so you stop, and then you ask yourself, am I hungry, angry, tired, or lonely? Lonely or tired, yeah. So like the main emotions that we probably are going to experience through the festive season. So it just gives you that pause so that you can respond rather than react. And then remember, by having those balanced meals, we will be able to use the halt because we're not reacting from that place of hunger where everything can be like that pressure cooker situation. So that was a summary. I want to thank everybody for listening. I'm sorry I can't see you. I would love to see you. And I love, like, I cannot get my mind away from all of these Christmas jumpers. I'm thinking the sausage dog ones and all of these and the knitted ones. Like, honestly, thank you so much for listening. You've been really great. And I cannot wait to see the chat. And now we're going to open the floor for questions. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Yancy. That was fantastic. I really love the festive mastermind, by the way. Super relatable. And just reading through the comments as it was going through, first of all, people are absolutely loving the Second Nature recipes. So we've got the Snickers smoothie and the butter bean mash and the cauliflower mash that people are really, really enjoying. And people are also talking about breakfast. So I thought that could be a good place to start. So people are saying, I don't start the day without breakfast. And some people are saying, well, I don't have breakfast. As a nutritionist and a coach, and this is open to you as well, Ren, what do you think is the importance of having breakfast? And if we tie that in with the festive season and thinking about kind of those foods on offer, how important do you think breakfast is?
I I think breakfast, the king meal, it's probably where we can start setting the right pace. Because being the first meal, if we allow ourselves, for example, to have some indulgence for breakfast, because we are balancing out with our proteins, our healthy fats, we're making it in a way where we actually can start feeling more in control of what we're eating. That will set a positive tone for the rest of the day, especially because very often we're going to be having work parties at lunch. We're going to have drinks starting at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So you can make breakfast also super fun. We have a fantastic Christmas granola. I'll share the link in a second.
Great
Where
choice.
Yes, and we had, so if you add spices, I think if you add cinnamon and ground cloves to anything, pretty much it's Christmas. I'm sorry, I was just looking at the chat. Yes.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, breakfast isn't for everyone, but in my experience as a coach, what I see is that people who don't tend to have breakfast tend to eat more later in the day. And,
Yeah.
our body's going to catch up with us at one point when we're hungry, right? So, we might not eat until maybe midday, 1 o'clock. And then what happens is maybe we get to the evening and then we end up eating more because at some point our body's going to need to eat something. So it can help. And also, if you get into the swing of it, it helps you just get into that pattern of having balanced meals each day. And I think even having that pattern can really help people to kind of stay on top of their habits, especially around the festive season, because people's routine goes out the window, doesn't it? I know for me, when I go home, there's food everywhere. So you end up just like nibbling throughout the day. And it's so easy to not pay attention to what you're eating a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think it's also worth remembering with breakfast is that sometimes as well, depending on our work patterns, like we might wake up like really early. Like I know that some people work shifts, waking up like at 4 or 5 in the morning, or even like looking after, relatives or children. So you wake up and maybe you're not really hungry, and then you have your commute, and it's okay to wake up and then maybe so have your breakfast later when you get to your work. Like it doesn't have to be straight when you wake up at that early period. Like it's okay to wait a little bit earlier. I'm sorry, a little bit later, so that it fits in with your routine. I think sometimes we have the idea that we have to wake up and then have our breakfast. Like no, it's okay to have a little bit of time, but it definitely does make such a difference into how much you're going to eat later in the day. And then the component of the breakfast is to include a good source of protein, right? And that's where we mentioned the Snickers smoothie. Yum, Greek yogurt,
So good.
delicious. If you want something more warm or like savory, like mini omelets or something like that, savory slice. But that source of protein is really going to help you keep fuller for longer throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So we've had some questions coming through. So someone has said, I'm finding it hard to work out portion sizes for the Christmas food. Is there a rough guide on how to work out what is a healthy portion, such as cake? They don't really go into the balanced plate, so I'm trying to sort this out where possible. Thank you.
I think that for this one, it really depends. And generally, mindful eating is what we want to use in this kind of instances, because you don't want to deprive yourself of something like a slice of fantastic, delicious cake for Christmas. And yes, you can make your own special dessert and bring it to a party or to an event. And in either instances, whether you're bringing something yourself or whether it's something that you really want to enjoy, which is absolutely fine, I would say that the portion size using our hands, for example, is really good. A slice of cake that is roughly the size of the palm of your hand, it's a good estimate. And after you're enjoying it, mindfully, so you're tasting it, you're flavoring the texture, the ingredients, and you're taking your time, you probably will realize that you're actually happy with one slice of cake. And if you're not, if you're actually genuinely connecting with your body's cues of fullness or hunger, then it's okay, perhaps, to have another one without feeling guilty. That's probably the most important aspect. Just do it because you're actually enjoying it and it doesn't derail any of the progress you've been making. It's just a meal that you're enjoying and it makes you connect with everything that is happening around you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that, Ren. And I think mindful eating, going back to what you were just saying, so many people realize a change in their satisfaction levels and managing portion sizes when they start to pay attention to their food. I mean, how many of us pay attention to our food? Like we're either on our phones, on our laptops, watching TV, we might be talking to someone. If we're having that slice of cake, are we actually sitting there and, taking in, how does it smell? How does it feel in your mouth? How does it taste? That kind of thing. You might even notice that after 5 to 10 minutes of eating it, you might not want that second slice of cake. And if you do, again, it's being kind to yourself and not feeling that guilt, because actually, I was saying this in the webinar that I did with Marianne on nutrition for the gut microbiome, that a lot of the time, we're telling ourselves certain things about food, and actually what we're telling ourselves can be worse than what we're eating.
That's a very good point. The stress that we're creating and the pressure that we're putting ourselves under. You actually, I remember when you were doing the webinar, it was a very good point. We are creating stress, which will also impair our digestion of food. And the digestion, the experience, it will actually physiologically raise our cortisol level, which will create a different array of problems. There's no need. And I know it's easier said than done, especially when we are surrounded by all that, it's happening around during the holidays. But as Yancy was saying really well, planning ahead reduces the risk of, like sort of impulse responses, and it makes us more in control.
So true. And something just flagged to my mind as well. I was speaking to one of the members on the program today about this, and I was saying how often when we are eating and we are feeling that stress, we we eat because we're feeling stressed, and then it affects our digestion and how we're feeling. So just taking a couple of deep breaths before we eat can really have an impact, because we go from being in flight or fight mode into rest and digest, and that can help us to enjoy our food more. So it's these little things that have a huge impact that sometimes we don't realize until someone says it to us.
Huge. It's very true, especially for people like I've seen in the chat a few people with dietary restrictions, and it makes a whole difference how we're the mindset that we're using to approach everything that we eat, whether it's because we have IBS or we have gastric reflux. It's incredible how deep breathing can calm the whole system and just make us be present, mindful, and enjoying more.
And applying these to situations over the Christmas period can have a huge impact as well. So, God, I love my family, but they're like family feeders. I know when I go home, my mum just tries to stuff me with everything, which I appreciate and I love because she's a great cook. But it's hard, when you don't want to say no, but in the back of your head, you're like, I don't want to offend you. And it's actually just maybe taking a little bit, doing the breathing, trying the mindful eating, and then you eat half of what you would have eaten normally if you weren't actually paying attention to it. So yeah, I agree with that. And also we've got a lot of love for the banana bread in the chat, which makes me very happy. That is one of our favorite recipes at Second
Oh,
H for sure.
it's one of the best.
Right, we've got some more questions coming in. So I like to have a latte every morning. Should I consider this as breakfast due to all the milk? Also, is oat milk better than cow's milk? I can drink either.
Absolutely. It's I'm trying to find it. That I always say, if cow's milk is not a problem, there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. Is full of nutrients. It's got a very generally full fat or semi-skimmed for some people that have issues digesting fat. It's very balanced. It's full of nutrients, and unless there is a specific restriction, I would always pick cow's milk if possible. But at the same time, if the preference for taste tells you that you like soy milk or oat milk because it's slightly sweeter, that can also be actually kind of a really good tip if you're trying to reduce sugar, especially. For example, you love to have your cappuccino, your coffee with a teaspoon of sugar. Switching to oat milk to start reducing it's not a bad idea, because at the end of the day, in a cup of coffee, the amount of oat milk that can go as part of a balanced diet in your day is not going to make a big difference. So I think in the end of the day, it really goes for taste. And it's Christmas, I would add cinnamon to that if I can.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing I would add as a consideration is, because the person's asked if they should have that instead of breakfast, I would say no. I would say try and eat some food if you can, because you think you've got the caffeine and you've got the milk. So the milk will, say you're having a semi-skimmed or full fat, you've got a source of protein and a source of fat. But then you've also got caffeine in there as well. So number one, make sure you're hydrating in the morning before you have any caffeine, because cortisol is highest. That's what wakes us up in the morning. You don't then want to add more on top of that. So I definitely would try and eat something small, something balanced, things like the mini omelette or even the banana bread. You could have it with a bit of yogurt on the side. If you are having a latte every day, I mean, it depends what you're worried about, if it's in terms of weight management or things like that, think about your energy intake for the whole day. If you were having like 2 or 3 lattes a day, that could be significantly adding into your energy intake. But if you're having one latte as part of, your balanced diet in the day, that should be fine. And as Ren said, oat milk or cow's milk, either or. What do you think, Yancy?
I was going to say, in addition to that, which, yeah, I totally agree, is to think about the size of your latte as well, because if you're having it regularly, that's also, if you're thinking about like weight management, it's going to have an impact. And also think about if you are adding syrups. I think somebody mentioned they drink the Starbucks eggnog. So that's probably going to be, syrups that are very high in sugar. And so that's going to significantly impact our blood sugar levels and then lead to that kind of like roller coaster throughout the day. Definitely have something to eat and consider maybe having the syrup on occasion. So, we can enjoy it. But if it's a daily thing, consider the size of a coffee and then maybe the syrups for just sometimes.
Because otherwise, I think if you don't eat and then you have that, you almost like have that spike in blood sugars. It leaves you then feeling a bit lethargic, and then you're hungry, and then you need another coffee to pick you back up again. And then, like you said, it's that roller coaster of just up and down. So yeah, food can play a big role in that for sure. And then we've got some more questions coming in. Let's have a look. I seem to remember from the program we should drink water before and after something sweet like fruit. Am I correct?
This is a good one. To remove the sweet taste, yes. But other than that, if you're craving something sweet, but you're not sure why you're craving it, having a glass of water is a good idea because it can be thirst. So that's the main thing I can think of. Is that you think what is that what the question?
It doesn't really say what it's to do with. It's just, yeah, just the question. I imagine it could be something to do with that though, because I was going to say I've never heard, yeah, I don't think it would make a difference if you were having water before something sweet, apart from the thirst side of things, because sometimes we can be thirsty and we think we're hungry. And then, yeah, I guess what you were just saying, Ren, afterwards of having some water to get rid of the sweet taste, especially if we notice that we get cravings a lot.
Yes. I don't think there's anything wrong to drinking water before, after, during, at any time anyway.
Keep hydrated. It's hard in this season to keep hydrated. If anyone does struggle to keep hydrated, herbal teas are the way forward. I absolutely love a herbal tea. Got them on the go, so anything that keeps me warm.
It's really true, actually, and because a stick of cinnamon, I keep saying,
We love
and
cinnamon.
it's a very good one. Uh, Ginger, cinnamon, and sometimes some turmeric, just with hot water. It really
Mm.
smells beautiful too,
Anti-inflammatory as well.
naturally, and it's actually pretty good for colds as well. Now, just because it's the season of that too,
It
unfortunately.
is the season. It's just the season of being cold.
Yeah.
Okay, we had another question. I struggle to stop eating nibbles at a party. I try to do the balanced plate, but I find it very hard to stop as I love nuts, crisps, savories. I don't like sweet foods that much.
I think we get back to the mindful eating approach. I would say that keeping hydrating during parties, it's crucial because as we are offered alcoholic drink, which is absolutely fine if you drink alcohol, then we will be probably having this classic situation where there's a lot of salty foods, savory foods that make you want to drink more, and you start getting into this cycle where you cannot stop sipping whatever is the cocktail or drink that you're sipping and eat the savory foods. So ideally, drink a lot of water with that, and try to be mindful and try to do it in a way where you know what you're doing. You instead of sometimes we start nibbling as we're socializing mindlessly. Instead, focusing on socializing, actually, sometimes we forget that we are at an event and we are listening to people's stories, sharing memories, connecting. And that's really also really important. Food is great and it's so important, especially this time of the year, but connecting, it's not only around that. So I think it's important to remember that as well.
Yeah, that's a really important consideration, Ren. I agree with that. And Jackie's made a point as well, which is it's kind of a question and a comment, where she said she often craves sweet things after an evening meal. And I think if I had a pound for every time I was asked this question as a coach, I would be living on a yacht in the Bahamas. But it's true. I think it's so common where people crave sweets after evening meals. It can be association. A lot of the time we can have that like savory meal and then want something sweet. And there's nothing wrong with it from time to time. I think if you want something sweet after an evening meal, that's okay. But sometimes it can become habitual behavior. So your body just gets used to it. It almost expects it. So you'll have your meal and then 5 minutes later you go, right, you're looking for the chocolate or you're looking for the sweet. So again, bringing it back to mindful eating techniques. Also portion it. If you're going to have something sweet, don't take the whole bar out. Like take maybe a square or two and sit and try and eat it slowly and see if that helps. Also, if you can like switch it out for something else, if you are craving something sweet, could you have like a herbal tea instead, like a fruit herbal tea that might give you that same sweetness without it? Or you could have a bit of the banana bread with some berries and yogurt, and that's like a balanced snack in the evening. So some ideas there. I hope they help.
Yeah, I was just
Yes.
going to add about the person that asked about the savory snacks is that sometimes when we have those strong cravings in these events, is because we're also not including these types of foods in our main meals. So if you do like that saltiness and that crunchiness, ensure that you are having those types of things when you are having your main meals. Now, this doesn't mean adding crisps to all of your meals, and no. Instead, it's about, can you add olives? Can you add like capers? Can you add feta cheese? If you like nuts, for example, you can make the Second Nature tofu stir fry. There are some cashews there. In your salad, add pumpkin seeds, roasted pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds. So you are getting that satisfaction throughout your time rather than eating. I'm not saying this is what you're doing, but instead of eating like bland foods, and then when you're surrounded by it, it feels overwhelming and it's hard to stop. So it's like a combination of things, enjoying the moment, but also what else are you doing throughout the week with your meals so you have that variety and that texture as well, especially if you like crunchy food, like add those texture. Another one that's really good is the roasted chickpeas as well. I love adding that throughout
Oh,
the
they're so good. I keep them in the fridge and I just have them as a topper on meals. They're so good.
yeah, that's like a really good idea. I didn't think of doing that.
Yeah,
uh, yeah, so yeah, just include those flavors so that we don't have to wait to have it, because if we enjoy it, why are we denying that pleasure to those situations, right? It's okay to enjoy your food as well.
and also we might enjoy it more when we take that pressure off ourselves a little bit.
That is so true. And I think that is one thing that I wanted to say is about self-compassion during the holidays, because generally, not just in this part at this particular time, because it's really easy to be hard on ourselves because there's so much expectation around this time of the year. And it's expectation that comes externally because we're surrounded by all these temptations and literally now it starts mid-November. So it's over.
And before that, it's like end of October, as soon as Halloween's
It's
out.
exhausting. It's exhausting. So,
Yeah.
it's like when we say, let's give ourselves a little break. And that helps also with the feelings of guilt whenever we start, labeling all that we should be doing and not what we shouldn't be doing. And like Yancy was saying, the strict rules that we set ourselves for ourselves, we're they're part of the all or nothing mentality, and they will set us for failure eventually. And then the cycle continues, and we can break it. And we can break it with balance and with being kind to ourselves, especially now. It's all about, caring and be kind to everybody. What about ourselves? We should do it too.
It's true. And someone's made a comment I've just been reading from Rebecca, and I totally hear her because she's just said, I wish I could have things like mince pies or chocolate in the house and eat these in moderation for dessert, but I always end up overeating. So I just try not to have them in the house at all. And I think this is so common that it goes back to what I was saying earlier in the chat at the top. Someone was talking about, there's certain foods that make us want to eat more because these foods are manufactured in a way that like bypasses that physiological response. And it's called the bliss point. So we just want to keep eating more of it. So actually, for some people, moderation and mindful eating can work. And for others, trying to limit that where they can be more helpful. I don't know what you two think about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we have to be really mindful of the ingredients that are in some of these foods that can lead us to eat more. And if you don't want them in the house, like that's also fine, right? Because if you want to change your habits, that could be a first step for somebody, and it's recognizing where you are, as long as it's not coming from a place of a good or bad. It's creating that environment that helps you make healthy choices. And then if you want to enjoy it outside of the house, then do. But I think as long as it's coming from that place about like the good and bad, so that it doesn't create that guilt when you do eventually have it, because realistically, will you be avoiding mince pies for forever, or whatever food it is. So it's just thinking about how does that look like in the long term when you don't have it in the house, right?
Yeah, that's so true. And I've just noticed we're coming up to 7 o'clock, so we've got the chance to answer one more question, I'd say. We've had a couple of people ask the same question about red wine, and whether red wine is good to drink. Do either of you have any thoughts on that?
Um, I would say if you enjoy a glass of red wine with your meals, absolutely. You can look at all the antioxidants of red wine. You have it with a meal. You're drinking it slowly, so that also, if you enjoy the taste of the wine when it goes with your food and it complements it, it's a fantastic experience. And if you want to have a second glass of wine, then perhaps trying to pace it, to have water in between, and to do it mindfully. Again, we keep repeating the balance and the mindfulness, because it's really
So
how
important.
how you make it sustainable. And that's what Jens is saying. Be
Yeah,
flexible with all of it.
absolutely. And the thing with red wine, when we're thinking, so the polyphenol content, which is like your antioxidants, etc., the benefit of that is if you have one glass. If you have two glasses, three glasses, four, you're losing that beneficial effect from the red wine, because then, the alcohol starts to bypass and it's in your bloodstream. So you're not getting that beneficial effect. So I would just say, if you are having it again, just enjoy it, slow down, have it. Alcohol can play a role in our diet as much as, the other occasional foods can too.
Yes, I think somebody earlier on asked about alcohol-free beer, uh, if it's still high in sugar.
Oh yeah, that's so alcohol-free beers are an interesting one, because so it all depends on the brand, right? And I think some of them have got loads of additives in there and they've got loads of added sugar. So first of all, I would say always look at the ingredients of what you're getting. And also, just because it's alcohol free doesn't mean you should drink more of it, because people will drink more than they would drink of regular beer, like alcohol containing beer. But it still contains carbs. It can still be easy to overdo it. So just, yeah, mindfulness, I think, is the takeaway word from tonight's
Mindfulness is
webinar.
yeah.
We've had lots of people saying thank you for tonight's webinar. A huge thank you to you, Yancy. It's been a very, very insightful webinar, and I think everyone who's joined has found it super useful. So yeah, huge thank you to you. Thank you to everyone for joining. We will have this up on YouTube, and you will get sent a recording of this within the week. And we look forward to welcoming you back for our January webinar, where we'll be focusing on ditching the New Year's resolutions and getting back into your habits. So have a great Christmas, everyone, and take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.